Alright, so this here is a test piece. I had to restart. Well, this is one of the pieces I intended to be one of the final pieces, but I had to restart on one of them. But I'm using it as a test piece to run this bead that's purely structural, aesthetic as well, I guess. But as you can see, I've laid it out. I've laid out my bead here, and that was the preliminary layout, but this will be the final one. So this is my center line of the bead, so I'll run the center of our die that you saw just a second ago. I'll run the center of this teardrop on that line, and that will give me a accurate image of where my bead will be and where I want it. And if you look closely, you can see around all the Sharpie and the scribe marks, the metal is shiny up here, and then down lower it has some what look to be impact marks, and that's because they are impact marks. Probably a little easier to see on the other side. And so what I did was I pre-stretched where I want my bead to be with the English wheel where I could, and then the planishing hammer where I couldn't, thanks to this bend here. But that just lets me put this bead in the panel without distorting the rest of it. So if I didn't pre-stretch here, it would pull material from here and create waves and ripples and just stuff we don't want. So right now this is just a test panel to see how much stretching I have to do and how much tension I have to use on the machine to get the bead that we're looking for. So I'm about to run it. Just set in here, and the reason I have it upside down like this is just because of the orientation of these dies. If I could flip them the other way, I could run it this way. Just something to pay attention to. So I will, well, first turn the machine on. Lower the arm down. So this being the test piece, I wasn't super worried about keeping it straight. So on the actual piece, I will be much more careful. But that's kind of what we'll be looking at. And I can go back, and on the edges here, you can see that's not the most defined end on either side. So I can go back with a hammer and dolly afterwards and kind of clean that up a bit. But I'll work it slowly, adding more and more tension to bring the speed more and more up, get it more and more defined. Alright, so here, well, this one shows it a little bit, okay, whatever. So I've got here marked out our bead. I mismarked here, and that's why I have the X's crossed out on that line. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to pre-stretch. So I'm just going to put in the planishing hammer in the other direction. And we're just going to hammer the hell out of it for a minute and get a good amount of shape so we don't distort the panel when we go to put the bead in. So as you can see, that panel used to be perfectly flat, and so now it's got a good crown on it. And so what that'll do is that'll just give us more surface area to draw that bead up in our pole max over there. So that'll just, the hopes are that I'll run the bead in the pole max, and all that extra material that we just created will draw up and it'll suck everything else back flat. Okay, so here we have the original panel that is not correct for the car. Just some little stuff that we explained earlier. So this is one of the panels that I have made. Pretty much the only thing that you did not see in the last time was this bead and this lip. This lip, pretty self-explanatory, pretty simple, rudimentary process. And just because of this here, it makes it a touch more difficult, I suppose. But I'm just taking a hammer, or a dolly and a hammer, putting my hard edge on a scribe line and smacking it over, being careful to be consistent. So as you can see, I took it slow, and this edge is nice and consistent. This outside edge isn't just yet because I don't have it all the way down, but it will be. And then here's how our bead turned out. It is, let's look at the back. It is maybe a ½ inch shorter than the original panel. So these are called, but those are them side by side. And as you can see, we don't have that pill-shaped hole in it, and that's something that we wanted to get rid of as well. And then we're missing some of the thicker metal bracket inserts, but those will get plug welded in once we have the panels final fitted into the vehicle. So that's what we're looking at. Alright, so we're here. We've got one panel just about wrapped up. I just have to make a couple little brackets for mounting them up. These are 14 gauge steel as opposed to the 18 gauge steel that the panels are made out of. So it's a touch more difficult to work with in certain ways. It's kind of a tricky little piece. It's not, nothing is a straight line or flat surfaces or anything. It's all very curved and rotated and twisted, but that's just the way these are, the way it has to be for mounting. So really I'm just taking little pieces of metal, and there's fancy ways of doing this. The best way to get it the most accurate is to set it over the edge of a table and gently hammer it down into where you want, and just kind of twist it and rotate it to get larger radiuses and shorter ones and sharper and more round. So that's what we're doing here. Oops. Alright, so we have our dust cover panels here. Both of them are cut out, edges bent, beads rolled, a little bit of shrinking on both of them from a little bit too much pre-stretching, but it's better to have a little bit too much than not enough. Mounting holes drilled and double checked. Aside from this hole on this panel in particular, I need to double check it again, or triple check it. Front mounting brackets fabricated. I'm about to plug weld them in, and we'll take a look at that. Prettiest of all time, but it's kind of an awkward angle, and I got the TIG rod in there with the electrode. got 2 plug welds. And this panel is, for the most part, complete as far as the metal work goes. Just got to throw it back up on the car and make sure everything is how we want it. Alright, so we showed you those Polmax dies that I made up earlier, and this is just a little progression of how a little fine tuning can make a world of difference. This was the first test piece, which self-admittedly isn't the best test piece because of these beads, but you know, gotta start somewhere, make it a challenge. But you can see it just kind of mangled it. Where I got good clean runs, it looks okay, but just not quite what we were looking for. But this is a slightly cleaner, or significantly cleaner test piece. Still have a bead in it. It had been broken here and all that jazz, so it wasn't perfect, but you can see after fine-tuning the dies, you know, came up with a much better result, much closer to the factory opening. This is a little template that was made off of the factory template, or factory panel. As you can see there, not exact, but it is a heck of a lot better than many other methods that would be viable. And it looks real clean, especially for the warp and whatnot of all this panel. So next time we see it, we'll be have a hole cut out of a fresh piece of metal, and we'll be running it through the Polmax and going on from there. Okay, so we have our 3 dust covers here. The 2 that we were previously talking about are painted and ready to go. They're just hanging up, completely curing and drying and all that good stuff. And then I have the latest one here. It has been completed, filed down, ground down, and tweaked and everywhere that we needed it to be. It's been mounted up, and I had all my holes to tolerance, or well, in place, lining up, I guess not to tolerance, but took it back off, sandblaster. Well, first brought the holes out just a little bit larger to make it easier to install, and then sandblasted. It'll need to get sandblasted again right before it gets painted, just to get as much oil and silicates out of the metal as we can, and then it'll get wax and grease removed, which is just a solvent, right before paint, and it'll be good to go on the car. It turned out really straight. Everything measures up very closely to the factory panel. All done in probably similar ways that it would have been repaired for the period.